The world of Fallout is filled with a number of hideous creatures, from scrotum-esque giant mole rats to terrifying irradiated crickets. But for many, the creature that elicits the biggest ick is your average ghoul. In the base game of Fallout 4, however, radiation merely takes away your health until you eventually die, which is very boring. Thankfully, mods exist, and with their help, radiation will actually turn my character into a ghoul if I'm not careful. And so, I have to beat Fallout 4 before becoming a ghoul. The two main mods we're using today are Dynamic Ghoulification and Classic Ghouls Redux by the retired modding duo Grilled Turkey. Among some visual edits to ghouls and changes to radiation sickness, which more similarly mirror Fallout 3's radiation system, hitting critical radiation sickness at 600 rads will eventually cause your character to ghoulify over the course of several days. And what better candidate to turn into a crusty ghoul than the smoothest, roundest man in the Commonwealth? A man I'll name Smoothskin. No, that's not right. Smoothskin. Yeah, that works. So Ken's special stats prioritize endurance for health and radiation-resistant perks, and strength, since I'll be going for a melee build, which leads into the rules for this run. I can't use RadAway or radiation treatments during the entire game. I can only use 3 Rad-X's during the course of the playthrough. I can't wear any power armor or hazmat suits, and I decided to make it melee only, because I think it'll make fights with feral ghouls, mole rats, and other irradiated creatures a bit more dangerous. Our run begins much like any other. I impatiently wait for the world to end. I hand out some coochie coos to the load Nora should have swallowed. Finally, Codsworth alerts us that war's been declared. It's a race to the neighborhood vault, and Smooth's diet of DoorDash Chick-fil-A finally catches up to him. The Patriots lose. We excitedly enter the vault, greet the staff. I win my divorce court hearing, and after remembering I kept the receipt for this ring, jump for joy. Despite putting hundreds of hours into Fallout 4, this is actually the first time I've ever done a melee-only build, and I had to say, the melee combat in this game stinks. Here you can see I've already taken my first bit of radiation damage, thanks to how shit I am at melee combat. And, I wasn't bit just once, not twice, not thrice, not quice, but 5 fucking times. Finally, I entered the Commonwealth with a rat or two, but none of my dignity. I stole someone's dog, and hacked, whacked, and smacked some raiders for their stuff. I even found my first bit of radiation-resistant armor, which will come in handy later. I left Preston to die because there is no chance in hell I'm fighting Deathclaw with a tire iron at level 2, and it was off to the big city. The random encounter shack had me asking myself, Yao Guai. I embarrassed myself several times in front of these raiders trying to jump on a boat. Maybe it's true what they say, wide men can't jump. After marveling at Bethesda's facial animations, it was finally time to enter the great green jewel of the Commonwealth. I will not be becoming a ghoul. Fenway's seen better days, but the smell of Boston's probably about the same. Big Boobus asked me to find her boss. I stopped Kyle from punching a hole in a wall ever again. But what you see versus what she sees, fellas. After a tough fight against a bunch of dogs, I decided the tire iron just wasn't cutting it, and a melee upgrade was needed. I headed for Hubris Comics, home of the legendary Grognak's axe. This turned out to be a mistake. It turns out Hubris Comics is loaded with ghouls who give off radiation with each attack, and, I realized the name Hubris is fitting here. I'd assumed my melee abilities were enough to protect against their onslaught without taking too much radiation damage, and I was wrong. On top of getting my meat beat by ghouls for 5 minutes, I also realized I was too stupid to open the glass case holding the Grognaks. But as a consolation prize, I grabbed the Grognak costume off the shelf upstairs and fled, only to be met with 50 rooftop ghouls. You bet your ass I ran as fast as my little legs could carry me. Operation Grognak was a resounding failure. After licking my semi-irradiated wounds, I donned my combat diaper and made a run for Park Street Station to find Nick Valentine. Using various Italians for batting practice did wonders to boost my spirits after being humiliated at Hubris. I even got to take revenge on one mafia ghoul, though his friend tossed me in the dumpster shortly after. A few times, if I'm being honest. After cleaning up the rest, I inserted my doodad into the thingy and smashed that like button, and my big bald ass finally entered the vault to save Nick Valentine. With a level up, I was able to add a new perk. So far, I've only gotten a point in big leagues, Aqua Boy to swim with no radiation, rad resistance for obvious reasons, and now I thought I'd get ghoulish, which is the most I'll become in this run, as I'll surely finish before becoming a full-on ghoul. I walked up to Dino and said, "Knife to meet ya." He responded by circumcising me with a Tommy gun. For round 2, I donned the official Redditor crown and beat the shit out of Dino with a baseball bat. Nick sparked one up to celebrate being saved, and Smoothskin committed a heinous act of violence on several unsuspecting goons. In a showing of solidarity with his fellow thick boy Skinny Malone, Ken tried to convince him to stop simping for Darla, but it fell on deaf ears, and a shockingly X-rated shootout occurred when the Darlussy was revealed. I'll see you in the next life, my big-boned brother. After exiting the tunnels, I was shocked to see that all the ghouls that chased me off the roof of Hubris Comics managed to fall to their deaths. I took this as a sign from Todd that this run was blessed, and I'd beat the game before becoming a ghoul. With spirits reinvigorated, I returned to Sanctuary to begin building some rad-resistant armor to keep ghoulification at bay. It was then that I realized what a fat idiot I am, in that the science perk is needed to apply the lead line effect to armor. My build for reference has 1 intelligence, and I need at least 5 more levels to get where I needed to be. And so I tripped face first down the tried and true rabbit hole of collecting steel and wood and spamming junk fences for hours at a time to increase my intelligence skill and nab the science perk. But I got bored and decided for now, I'm just gonna quest until I had to head to the glowing sea. Nick tried to break into some guy's house, I recreated the movie Two Girls, One Mug, and after becoming the world's worst drag show Elvis, convinced the mayor's pig-nosed secretary to give me the keys to the Benz. After breaking into his house and stealing his drugs, we were off to Kellogg's castle to bonk him on the head. I unfortunately got bit by a mole rat or two and took some rads. I also got whacked off by a ghoul, and returned the favor. This ghoul was clearly sponsored by Monster Energy and could sense that I drank a Red Bull earlier that day. Needless to say, he unleashed the beast all over my face and chest, and my rad count had more than doubled in an embarrassingly short amount of time. Then, after what seemed like endless walking, we finally made it to Kellogg's lair. One nice thing about finding the turrets there is that they can't move, and there's no way for me to possibly miss them with my bat. At least that would be true if I weren't completely incompetent. God, how embarrassing. Once inside, another turret made a fool of me, and I was reminded how goddamn annoying it was to have every melee attack blocked or interrupted by a gun bash. I have to say, this is the worst part of the run for me. There's a reason I never use melee weapons in Fallout 4. I decided the best way to deal with Kellogg was just to bum rush his ass with a stun baton, and to my surprise, it actually worked. With Kellogg's brain in my pocket, I took the elevator to the surface and walked like a badass in front of the Pridwin, only to then be embarrassed once again by a turret I had apparently forgotten about before entering Fort Hagen. I cannot even tell you how stupid I felt in this moment. At this point, the run was off to a bit of a shaky start, but I pressed onward. Nick and I met with Piper for some reason, and I decided I'd bring her along, which apparently triggered her fight or flight response. And then it was off to Good Neighbor to do the worst quest in the game. The loading screen when I fast traveled was taunting me, probably a bad omen. After landing in Good Neighbor, I admired Hancock's makeover. The Ghoul Redux mod is really cool. It was time for Dr. Amari to get us into the mind of a bald. I stole all her supplies. I can't use these, but at least I can sell them. And it was time to begin the 10-minute snore fest that is Kellogg's brain. I'll skip that segment for you. I'm sure you've all seen it a million times, but the gist of it is I have to find a virgin in a sea of radiation. But first, I have to continue the power leveling I'd procrastinated earlier. There's no way I'd go to the glowing sea without some more rad resistance. This took the better part of an hour, I think, and was a combination of spamming wire fences and fence posts, gathering more steel and wood, scrapping said posts and fences, and spamming them once again. Riveting stuff, I know. At this point, I was finally a high enough level to get the science perk and 2 ranks of armorer, the requirements to build leaded armor, and now all I needed to do was buy a gigaton of lead, which turned out to be hard to find. Cum Dumpster Carla had, at best, a 5-pound weight containing only 2 lead. Percy Jackson only ever had pencils, 1 lead. Arturo was useless. Moaning Myrna had a pencil. This old bitch at the diner actually came through with a 10-pound weight, 3 lead. And that cycle pretty much continued for 30 minutes until I remembered about the vendors in Good Neighbor. And wouldn't you know it, Cleo had a full shipment of lead. All I'd ever need. No wonder there's so much Rule 34 of her out there. Finally, I finished my leaded armor and it was time to head to the glowing sea. Almost. You see, I was still pretty pissed I'd gotten so many rads trying to get Grognak's axe, and Piper doesn't know how to lockpick. But a certain coked up ginger in a place called the Combat Zone held the keys to my salvation. Or rather, the lockpick. The gang of balding raider losers were no match for my mighty bat. And in no time, I tossed Piper in the trash and replaced her with my new toy. Back at Hubris Comics, I struggled against Bethesda's buggy companion navigation to get Kate to open the damn case. She chose to get really high instead, until finally she jogged around the counter, tried to unlock the case, broke a lockpick, opened the case, and the treasure I'd coveted for so long was finally mine. Axe in hand and leaded armor abound, it was now time to head to the glowing sea. Deer were no match for my mighty weapon, nor were gunners, except when they somehow blocked it several times in a row with their bare hands. A Mirelurk King was definitely a match for it. I wasn't even going to try with the Alpha Deathclaw, and we'd finally made it to the glowing sea and began our race against rads. My strategy in the glowing sea was fairly simple. I ran as fast as I could in more or less a straight line to Virgil's cave. I didn't have a moment to spare, and at the edge of a Deathclaw's on-ramp, my first radiation poisoning prompt appeared, warning me that ghoulification was imminent if I didn't get my smooth, round ass somewhere a little less green and irradiated. And by the way, that Deathclaw was a slow loser who even a fat boy like me could easily avoid. Get fucked, bitch. I continued onward when radiation really started to get hot. I took my first of 3 allowed rad-X of the game, reducing my radiation load quite a bit. Finally, I made it to Bullwinkle's cave with somewhere around 40% of my health gone due to rads. Green Dave Batista wasn't very happy to see me, but decided to help me anyway, and the bulk of the glowing sea portion of the story was dealt with. Back in the Commonwealth, I donned my Depends and began my hunt for the ultimate Institute killing machine, a courser. And apparently one lives at this random business. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention to that part of the story. This place was apparently a war zone though, filled with gunners, and my worst enemy, turrets. And it was at this point I started to realize that having only a little over half health due to radiation poisoning was gonna make things pretty tough the rest of the game. Gunners were pushing my poop in left and right, especially by constantly interrupting my swings with gun bashes. This part here was especially annoying because every time I got close to this doorway, some fucker would shoot me with a missile launcher. And this fucking guy would just run away from me, then he'd block my attacks, and then when I tried to swing, he'd run away again. It was maddening. I hate melee in this game so much. After what felt like an eternity, I finally caught up to the courser, who, like Kellogg, was actually kind of a pushover despite being invisible. Though I do admit I chopped Kate in half a few times on accident. This part was pretty funny where Kate and I were just spit roasting him. A few more satisfying chops later, and the man was finally debunned, and the Corsair chip was mine. I brought the chip to Amari because the game told me to, and she told me to go find the Railroad, the shadowy group who hide behind the most difficult gaming puzzle in history. Actually, that's a lie. The answer to the puzzle is literally just their name. When I first played Fallout 4, I thought it'd be some obscure reference to American history, like One If by Land or something, but Bethesda decided to outsmart me with a dumb answer. Once I cracked the code, everyone in the Railroad clapped, and with some kind words from Mr. Myaz, Des the Mommy decided to let me come inside. Once inside Railroad HQ, I waited patiently for Tweaker Tom to crack the Institute's code, which I guess was a success. I wasn't really listening. It was back to Virgil's cave for me. He gave me some schematics for a thingamajig. I then had to decide between using the Minutemen, the Brotherhood, or the Railroad for help. I figured I'd head to Concord though to help the Minutemen so I could test my axe on that Deathclaw I was afraid of before. Even with some radiation poisoning and lower health, Raiders are just a breeze to chop up now. That is when they're not gum bashing you out of a swing or blocking my giant fucking axe. But fighting these three guys was so frustrating. At least Kate was helping out. smoothskin met with Preston Garvey for the first time, and Deliverance Fonzie told me to go grab some power armor. Unfortunately, power armor is against the rules of the run, so I just used it to get the minigun out of the way and gave it to Kate for helping me with the axe earlier. Then I aimed for the bushes, missed, found a safer way down, and made my way to the Deathclaw to test my might. But I was too much of a little bitch and decided to enlist the aid of the nearby Brotherhood patrol. Of course, I still had to get the last hit like a true gamer. With that handled, Garvey invited me to his squad, I put this old bitch in her place, and headed back to Good Springs to build the teleporter. At least that's what I thought, but no. Preston had some other plans and decided to whisper, "Another settlement needs your help," from the bushes like some kind of playground prowler. Apparently I had to help some random settlement before he'd let me build my teleporter. Bethesda's Radiant quests always get you in the end, I guess. I met Nick Mullen at the settlement and he asked me to take out some employees of the local car dealership. I think we've all felt that way once. Once in Corvega, I beelined to Jared and turned his footlong into a 6-inch and promptly ran away. I gave the settler the good news and he got straight down on his knees to thank me. I tried telling him again, and this time he showed that not only was I fat and bald, but a manlet too. After giving Preston the good news, he decided the Fonz could help me build my teleporter now, who, with his immense engineering knowledge, knew how to bang on a fan with a hammer. Great. In the end, Sturgis didn't really actually do anything since I built all the pieces, but at least he did press the go button when it was time to teleport. I blew myself and got zapped into the Institute. There was something pretty funny about the juxtaposition between a big fat bald diaper man and the high-tech environment I was in. And so I decided, in this moment, that instead of chopping up my son the moment I saw him, I was going to side with the Institute. I met and traumatized my sussy imposter son, squared up with the real one, and began my tour of the Institute at the Gorilla exhibit, which ended poorly when I made a move on the Alpha Gorilla's wife. After meeting all the boring side characters, Father sent me to Pirate Island to poop in Captain Jack Sparrow's bed, which after a few setbacks ended up being as easy as pressing the X button. After a dramatic man-boob reveal, Father let me know I'd been a good little boy and I'd be getting my own room so I wouldn't have to sleep with the gorillas anymore. Yippee! After a nap, it was off to Bunker Hill to smack around the homeless who were trying to steal some of the Institute's walking, talking toasters. The JROTC also showed up, but with a quick hop, skip, and a jump, I'd breached the tourist-trapped defenses. Clearing out the enemies inside was pretty easy. I just hid behind walls and jumped out shouting and axe-wielding, "Surprise!" And after saying the magic words, B257 initiate reset authorization code Theta 93 Stratus, my work there was done. I received a message to meet Father on the roof of Harvard. I told him to do a backflip, and he just said Boston looks like shit, which I can't say I really disagree with. Back underground, I had to attend a boring staff meeting, but Father told me if I stood still, I'd get a treat. A few dialogue options later, and it was revealed my son, Father, had cancer, and after he kicks the bucket, I'd become the top cock in the Institute henhouse. Which is a bit surprising considering I've only done like 2 quests for them, but that's Bethesda for you. I was now apparently being tasked with finding the Berry Yum Alligator, which I think is a new vape flavor, and it was off to the teleporter pad to Masshole Fusion, where shortly after arriving, I received an involuntary laser hair removal procedure. Having only half HP or so at this juncture in the story meant I had to be a little bit cautious with how I approached combat. It also meant it was time to do copious amounts of psycho and buff out to even out the stat debuff my radiation poisoning caused. High out of my mind, not even Brotherhood armor stood a chance against my rippling muscles and deadly axe. Continuing into Mass Fusion, I realized this elevator segment is a pretty terrible experience for a melee build. I spent the next 4 minutes or so cowering behind Kate and Allie, who all dubbed Smooths as angels. Once we were finally at the bottom floor, combat against the Brotherhood was proving to be a cakewalk. My tried and true method of hiding behind doors and popping out to take a swing or two before running away was proving to be quite effective. But the familiar ticking of my Geiger counter let me know it was time to hang up my melee panties and don my radiation-resistant garb once more. Later in the quest, Allie let me know I'd be diving into a radiation-filled room, an obviously problematic scenario for this particular challenge, but I put on a brave face and declared I was all set while she ran circles around me, taunting my stupidity for choosing an Institute ending in a low radiation run. A lovely shower wiped away the sins of my past, and all the ghouls I failed to dodge died in vain. It was now time to dive into the belly of the beast, the irradiated reactor room. I took my second allotted dose of RadX for the run in preparation, and the doors opened to an irradiated hell only a guy like smoothskin could tame. I was once again afflicted with minor radiation poisoning in a matter of seconds. Upon reaching the platform and hitting Bop It, advanced radiation poisoning had set in. I thought it'd be prudent to take my third and final RadX, but its effects were hardly noticeable, and I have now reached a critical point, specifically the point of critical radiation sickness. In 24 in-game hours, the dynamic ghoulification mod will begin to turn poor Smoothskin into Krusty Ken the Ghoul. But I had no time to spare worrying about that. I grabbed the Birmingham Navigator, and with the effects of critical radiation poisoning turning me into a snail, popped the buff out for some extra strength and endurance, and made a heroic leap back to the shower. I really have no clue how I survived this part if I'm being honest. Even the game text let me know that Smoothskin was dead meat. But somehow I survived on what must be like 0.0001 HP. I think it was possibly the ghoulish perk restoring tiny bits of HP with the residual radiation seeping in. The showers of Todd himself gave me new life, but the damage was done, and it was only a matter of time until ghoulification occurred. And some of you might be thinking that the mod was what kept me alive, but I did do a previous attempt and failed to jump like an idiot, only for radiation to overcome Smoothskin in the waters below. You probably know what comes next, and even though the big sentry bot was pretty big and imposing, he wasn't too hard to defeat using the tried and true door peeker strategy from before. Well, that is when he wasn't blowing me up. Round 2 went a little smoother, with the wall peak barely saving my bacon. My sworn enemy, the turret, was no match for the Fighting Irish, and I almost lost my mind fighting the 2 Assaultrons who would not give me a second to swing my axe, but in the end, they fell too. After going Paul Bunyan on some Boy Scouts, I zapped back to the Institute where time was of the essence. The nice thing about the Institute teleporter is it's nearly instant, so only a minute of game time passes between each fast travel to and from the Institute. I reported to Daddy's son, who said he was proud of me, and then sent me off to recruit a new scientist. I stacked the gunners outside like firewood for my wood stove this winter. Apparently they were hired muscle for the nerd we were planning to invite to the Institute. I met a unique named door. The speech check let me know it was time to don my most charismatic outfit. I also popped some pills for good measure. They're grape! I was then surprised to see the door swing open, revealing a balding scientist. I don't believe you're supposed to see this NPC, and when I told him to calm down, his ventriloquist act seemed to corroborate that suspicion. Back at the Institute, I declared mission accomplished, and Father passed me the ox. I spit so hard, 3Dog retired. And it was time to bully Diamond City's littlest bitch, Travis the DJ. This little minigame where you have to insert the right sproing into the correct goob is really stupid. With the radio fixed, it was time to turn on the nuclear hamster wheel. I put in the burgundy analator and struggled to close the doors for several seconds. As the new father of the Institute, I made the decision to pop the Brotherhood's little balloon. After all, they're a bunch of LARPing army man losers, and it'd be pretty funny. The father said first, let's go dunk on Desdemona. Say less, said Smoothskin, and it was off to the Old North Church to rail the road. Desdemona said she'd heard some disturbing things about me, and frankly, that's what really pisses me off in this day and age. You know, people will believe the first thing they hear without actually talking to the person who's supposedly in the wrong. I mean, it's cancel culture run amok. Here I am. I mean, sure, I've captured runaway synths just for wanting freedom. Sure, I've decimated hundreds of Railroad and Brotherhood soldiers just doing what they're told. And sure, I've betrayed my own wife and several of the friends I've made along the way by siding with the Institute who've torn their lives apart. But I mean, come on! Anyway, check out this sweet kill cam on Tinker Tom. Finally, it's the endgame, and I miraculously, thanks to the Institute's quick teleportation, haven't begun to turn into a ghoul yet. I get zapped to Logan Airport, run past all the plebs at the entrance, do some pro bono dental work on Quinlan, and assault the first generator. I put my turret-crushing proficiency on display and take out Generator 2, and tank some measly damage while smashing Generator 3. It's finally time to cancel the Brotherhood's Prime subscription. I know that's not a funny joke, but I'm very tired of writing this script at this point. I decided to take some celebratory jet for getting this far, and gave the Brotherhood's proctologist some of her own medicine. The next part is just a bit of boring waiting. In fact, it's so much waiting that the first step in Smoothskin's ghoulification process actually began. The lighting here is not great, but I hope you appreciate me taking the time in the middle of the final battle to show you my peeling face skin. Scribe Halen gets whacked. Elder Maxon hides from me in his helicopter like the big pussy he is. I graciously give Kate a Stimpack for the first time as a thank you for being my meat shield. And the virus is finally uploaded. You've done good, little buddy. I saw a celebrity on my way out. My Hero Academia! As the Brotherhood's hopes and dreams came crashing down like everyone's in East Boston, Smoothskin, skin beginning to peel, still bald and fat, looked back on all he'd accomplished. And as his face slowly ghoulified at his son's deathbed, I rubbed celebratory lotion on my own, having beaten Fallout 4 before becoming a ghoul. Now, I won't leave you hanging because you're probably wondering what each stage of becoming a ghoul looks like. After waiting 24 hours, you can see the prompt and how it's progressed. 24 more hours and he's becoming a piece of raw chicken. And the final stage is prompt with some neat gameplay benefits and detriments. And there's our ghouly guy. He's still a little fat. He's still a little bald, but my god, he ain't smooth no more. Behold, the new face of the Institute.